Hey guys, what's up? This is Stock Retail coming back to you. Saw a tweet yesterday and then saw it kind of again today that made me want to do some digging. So I want to talk today about this notion that AMC has a few bonds out there with some really high yield to call. What the heck does that mean? And what is that a signal of? Kind of a so what on that. So it was, I think a lot of people kind of seeing that on Twitter and going, oh man, is that negative? Is that positive? Want to just talk through just a tiny bit of DD I did on that, what that might mean, and does it signal, AMC paying off debt quicker? Does it signal AMC having problems? That was kind of the discussion on Twitter. So I'll kind of go through that and show you what I found. A little nod here to the movie coming up. If you haven't heard of Sisu, I think this may be a bit of a nice surprise. It's coming out on the 28th of April, and it's basically uh, it's basically a dude just taking care of Nazis. Well, let's put it that way. A pretty violent movie, but it looks like it's going to be pretty cool. And then obviously fun, with the kind of nod to gold mining and all of that, if you're kind of following Highcroft mining. So I'm going to also talk about some updates on the box office, just how great that's tracking. I know I've talked about that a few times, but we've looked forward to this quarter for a very long time. I mean, I've looked forward to it for even maybe a year. So I want to give you some updates and talk about what to expect the rest of the quarter, and how is AMC going to be doing. There was even like a headline from Moody's recently, kind of casts some doubt on companies with a lot of debt and all that. So it's just nice to know how is AMC actually tracking, and what should we be expecting out of the business results. So first things first, I mentioned those AMC bonds were showing extremely high yield to call, like some crazy numbers. We're talking like 5-digit percents. And so, I'm not a bond expert, so I had to actually just go look and say, okay, what does that mean? And I found some things. So, like, first off, you can see here, I found kind of 3 different websites. I'll try to link those up kind of in the comments for the video so you can go check for yourself. I did also tweet a reply, so you could kind of go look on my Twitter feed and see, what's the post I was talking about. You can actually see those bonds and see those yield to calls. So you can see here, yield to call is a calculation that determines basically yields if a bond can be called by the issuer. So like a callable bond means there's a maturity date on bonds. So you might know like a lot of AMC's bonds don't come due until like the big chunks are in 2026 and 2027, which by the way is another way that you can kind of be anti-FUDed. When people try to say, oh, AMC's debt, well, the big chunks of it aren't even due for basically 2+ years and then 3+ years. So 2026, 2027. You can imagine how much the industry and AMC is turning around in that amount of time. So that's just good to know. But anyway, so the maturity date, let's say those 2026s, they mature in 2026, meaning AMC is supposed to pay them off then. And that's if they don't refinance or anything like that, right? Well, if they're callable, that actually means the bond issuer, in this case AMC sold the bonds, AMC issued the bonds to get debt. If they're callable, that means you, the issuer, can pay them off early. And so if you see here, yield to call calculation that determines possible yields if a bond can be called by the issuer, reducing the amount of money the investor receives because the bond's not held to maturity. So a bond, like think about if I own the bond, if I bought it, I'm getting paid interest. People even invest in bonds, right? You hear stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Well, the bonds part of that is I can receive interest payments. So maybe I have like a safer investment. It's not like to the moon like stocks. It's got like a set interest rate I'm making. But I can make money because I have that cash flow coming in, right? So that's why sometimes people will invest in bonds. Maybe we'll save the rest of bond investing for some other video. But here's the point. If I buy that thinking I'm going to get all these payments on this bond, but there's a risk that the bond could be called early, I'm not going to end up receiving all those payments. And so that's what this yield to call ratio is. It's just a math formula, and if you go find it, you can kind of tweet or Google the formula, and you'll see it looks complicated, but it's kind of explainable, and it has to do with the amount of time till something could be called, sort of compared to the amount of time till maturity, and you kind of figure this out. So a high yield to call, essentially, if I'm reading this right, means there's some risk you won't be able to hold this till maturity. Well, why would you not hold a bond till maturity? That means the issuer paid it off. So I want you to hear that clearly. a high yield to call if I'm seeing this right. I'm putting that if a lot because I'm still kind of learning yield to call. Before today, I didn't even really know that metric. Um, it sounds to me, it reads to me like it's indicating the market thinks AMC might pay debt off early. That sounds like pretty good news. And so don't let yourself be fudded on that, but let's do some more DD. I always say just be careful not to just take my word for everything. I'm just another guy. I'm not a bond expert. So I went and did some reading, and I'm showing you what I read and how I interpreted it. We should all dig more together and educate each other. That's what apes do. So here's just another source. You can kind of see that formula there. And you can see this is this is Wall Street Prep. If the yield to call is greater than the yield to maturity, which these were for AMC, they were very, very high, it's reasonable to assume there's a high risk the bonds are unlikely to remain trading until maturity. So I suppose someone could try to argue they won't be traded because someone's defaulting or something like that. I think in this case, based on AMC's cash position, based on the way Q2 is going, and based on the fact that at some point here we're done with this court case and AMC has a heck of a lot of access to capital, bankruptcy is not on the table as far as I'm concerned, as far as all my DDs. So I think this more means it's a market signal that AMC might call the bonds, right? Remember this whole yield to call. And then you can even see, so call options value surges as the issuer's probability of calling the bonds increases. Hence the price of callable, blah, 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 blah. So it's kind of just talking about that whole yield to call spikes because it may get called. So I think that's pretty cool. It sounds like good news to me, but I'm just being, repeating over and over that I'm not an expert on bonds, and this requires more DD before I could say to you clearly that I know I'm right. This is just 3 sites that I found and my interpretation of what I read. We'll do some more DD on this, but I guess for me, I was a little bit excited that it might be hinting at the market expecting AMC to potentially call some bonds. Okay, let's talk about Q2 results. I'm going to whiz through this, and this will be kind of a shorter video than usual. I shared with you the other day, now this is updated, a few more days worth chart where you basically just say, hey, if this was 2 runners, if the bottom line at 0 is the exact amount of box office revenue that we'd had at the domestic box office in 2022. So if we were exactly keeping pace with 2022, our line would be down there. Right now, we're basically at $600 million ahead of 2022 through, I think this is like 110 days or so, something like that. So it's literally through yesterday, April 19th. We're about $600 million ahead of last year. But let's see what's happening the rest of the quarter. And I want you to get a real sense and really ground yourself. If you own a movie stock, you really ought to know what's the business. And in fact, this may be a more predictable stock than most because, maybe with Amazon, you don't know exactly how much they're going to ship day to day. But with movies, you know what the release schedule is and you can kind of predict. So let's just look at that. And I want to make sure you guys know because this all relates to all the different discussions we see. And for me, it gives me a lot of confidence knowing what's happening in the business. So first off, today's Thursday, actually. These movies come out tonight. We've got Evil Dead Rise, we've got The Covenant. Those are kind of mid-level movies. Evil Dead Rise is probably a little bigger than The Covenant in my forecasts. We'll see if that holds true. Actually, maybe a bit more than a little bit bigger. But, neither one's a blockbuster, but they're decent-sized movies. And I've done other videos where I kind of talked to you about we're getting a lot more of those mid-sized movies than we did last year. And they're filling in a lot of revenue. And then also they're bringing in, other people. Let's say someone is only into Marvel, but there's someone else who's not into Marvel. Well, now they've got, some non-superhero movies to come to. So that's really great. Then, next week already, so we've got Sisu. I talked to you about that one. I personally think that may be a nice surprise at the box office. We'll see. I haven't actually made that big of a forecast on that one. I'm just staying conservative until I really see that happen. But I'm feeling hopeful that it will beat some numbers. Let's put it that way. And so let's see. It feels kind of like basically a Violent Night with, Santa kicking bad guys' butts. This is a gold miner kicking Nazis' butts. Like, I don't know what's not to like about that. Sounds pretty fun. Then you've got Big George Foreman, obviously a very fun and maybe inspirational story. I think that's going to be pretty cool. Maybe trade on some of the energy of Creed 3. And you've got Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That just has a lot of history behind it and a lot of connection to girls in particular who've now grown up to be women who maybe want to share that with their daughters. My understanding is it's kind of a nice, I don't know, I don't quite want to call it heartwarming, but a fun story and kind of, a lighthearted look at things that girls have to go through. And so there's a lot of industry projections that might actually be a decent sized movie as well because of sort of the known value of its franchise, put it that way. Like the name is known. So we've got 5 kind of decent sized movies coming in, and I've been tracking this for quite a while, as I've told you, and so it's kind of hard for me to impress on you how excited I am that we've got these 5 movies here filling in the gap between our blockbusters. We didn't used to have the gaps filled as much, and so that's part of why we're tracking so far ahead. Meanwhile, Mario is still just cranking, right? Then we get Guardians, which is going to be huge, and we just keep rolling from there. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you is the next 2 weeks, and as we get into the earnings call and all of that, I would just really watch the flow of, okay, how is Mario kind of holding up? How are these 5 movies coming in? And then once we get to Guardians, just watch this thing be this huge ball rolling downhill, because watch the rest of this quarter now. The next week, you get 3 more pretty decent sized movies. You get Book Club 2, Knights of the Zodiac, and Love Again. And I realize some of you might not have heard of some of these, but since I've been tracking these more deeply, I guess I'm starting to finally have some history on what feels like a decent sized movie. Like that Book Club 2 is going to be, well, I don't want to say the forecasts because they're all over the place, but it's going to be a decent sized movie. No blockbuster again, but it's going to help fill in the revenue by quite a bit. And that Knights of the Zodiac was one that I didn't know about before the quarter, but that one also looks like we're kind of maybe double digits in millions at the box office, so that's great. Then, boom, we already get Fast X. Not to mention we also get this About My Father, which is De Niro, and that looks hilarious. If you've seen the previews, it looks pretty funny to me, and I think it's going to do well. So you get another blockbuster plus another nice mid-sized movie, and we just keep going, because then you get Little Mermaid. You get, actually, if you haven't heard about The Boogeyman, that's a Stephen King movie. So obviously the Stephen King name will draw some people, and that's not going to be, small necessarily. You get the Spider-Verse movie, which I think is going to be really big as well. And then you get Strays, which is actually Will Ferrell and Jamie Foxx, if you didn't know. So it looks, if you look at the cover, you probably think, oh, that's a kid's movie. It's like dogs, and I think it's like talking dogs. But it's actually rated R, so I think it's kind of one for adults and basically probably darker humor. Probably kind of funny. I mean, Will Ferrell is always funny, right? So that's not going to be small. And we get Transformers, Rise of the Beasts. That's going to be huge. And then we just keep going. Guys, it doesn't stop. And I've told you this on some videos, but I just wanted to finally really show you. And I'm not even showing all the movies. I'm just showing kind of most of them. So you get The Blackening, which looks hilarious. I don't know if you can read. It's probably small on your screen, but it says, "We can't all die first." So I think that's just kind of a nod to, if you go back like maybe in the 70s, if you had like a sci-fi movie, it was always the one token minority who was going to like get killed by the alien or something. So I have a feeling The Blackening's kind of a play on that. Should be kind of fun. And then you get Elemental. So we haven't had a Pixar movie in a little while. That's probably going to be pretty big, and maybe I should have made that one bigger here. But I'm just trying to highlight what I think are the real blockbusters. And you get The Flash. And then we keep going. So you get Asteroid City. Go look at how many stars are in Asteroid City. That's pretty interesting. And that was another one that wasn't really forecasted before the quarter came. And you actually get a Jennifer Lawrence movie. So she's doing kind of a rom-com. Maybe kind of her first rom-com, if I recall. So that's going to be kind of fun seeing her, branching out from movies like The Hunger Games and now doing more of a rom-com. So that's going to be fun too. I think that's called No Hard Feelings. And then you get another, kind of family movie, cartoon. It's called like Teenage Kraken. And I hadn't really been tracking that one too closely. Thought it was kind of maybe smaller. And lately I've been seeing some industry forecasts that are quite a bit above my forecast on that one. So I'm excited to kind of say that one ought to be decent. And Indiana Jones may be the biggest movie of the year. I'm not sure. We could all debate what the biggest movie will be. But I guess those two movies, they're only one day in the quarter, right? So the quarter ends June 30th. They come out June 30th. So we won't get a lot of revenues from those in the quarter, but it's definitely something. And Indy's so big, probably that opening is itself like a mid-sized movie, and that's why I'm kind of showing that here. So just to go back, really what we're saying, you're going to see noise about debt. I mean, you always have, right? That's been the whole journey. Meanwhile, AMC keeps building up cash, keeps getting stronger. Popcorn's out. We've got, gosh, we had 80,000 people signed up for the credit card or something like that. I'm sure that grew quite a bit since. Potentially this yield to call, meaning, maybe these bonds will get called. Meanwhile, we're $600 million ahead of last year at the same day, while the rest of Q2 is going to track well above last year. When I say we're $600 million ahead, so far this quarter we've only had the one real big movie, Mario. Look at the bottom of just this slide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more, and then the next slide, 6, 7 more big movies just this quarter. And so my forecast is by the end of the quarter that we would be almost $1 billion ahead of last year. $880 million ahead of last year. That's pretty sizable. That's just the first half of the year. We're almost $1 billion ahead of last year. So, don't let anybody tell you that movies aren't back, because we're tracking well ahead of last year. And what's more, I've been pretty clear on this channel. I believe that means Q2 is profits. And I say every time, I could be wrong. That's a forecast. That's a forward-looking statement. And I'll keep saying that every time so that no one can ever misunderstand me or go back and quote me wrong later. But my personal forecast is we will have profits this quarter. I believe that. So with that, I'll just kind of end for today. Just wanted to kind of share with you in case you sort of see, so that you can't be fudded about that sort of high yield to call. We'll do some more DD on that. But good Lord, celebrate Q2. Why don't I just leave up, as I end this, what's directly in front of us. Just a slew of movies that are going to be coming through. Plus, we've got that earnings call. So let's go.